Welcome to the 38th episode of the Reading and Writing Podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Rutherford. Stay tuned for my interview with James Benn, author of the Billy Boyle World War II mystery series.
Well, this is Jeffrey Deaver, author of, most recently, The Burning Wire, and soon to be author of the next continuation James Bond novel. I spend a lot of time writing, a lot of time researching my books, but when I'm not doing that, I love listening to the Reading and Writing Podcast, which you can hear at readingandwritingpodcast.com.
Well, welcome back to the Reading and Writing Podcast. My guest today is James Benn, author of the Billy Boyle World War II mystery series. Benn's latest novel, Rag and Bone, is available in hardback now at your local bookstore. Jim, welcome to the Reading and Writing Podcast.
I'm glad to be here.
Great. Well, if someone hasn't read one of your Billy Boyle novels, can you describe what they can expect with your latest book, Rag and Bone?
Well, I could say that, as Publishers Weekly said in their starred review, it's superb and stellar, but it's really a story about, as they all are, about true historical occurrences during World War II, told from a fictional point of view. So my character, Billy Boyle, is a military detective, and in Rag and Bone, he is sent to London to investigate the death of a Soviet official from the Soviet embassy, who was killed, who was murdered in a way similar to how thousands of Polish officers were executed by the Soviets in a Caton Forest, what became known as the Caton Forest Massacre. So Billy goes to London, and he's forced to investigate a murder that brings up an issue that's very divisive among the Allies, because the Soviets are providing, 99% of the manpower that's fighting the Germans, and Churchill and Roosevelt are reluctant to label them as killers in the way they labeled the Nazis, justifiably so, as mass murderers. So his investigation comes up against the political realities and hardball of a nation at war, and that's what provides the conflict for him as he goes through that investigation.
Great. Well, as you mentioned, the Billy Boyle novels are mysteries set during World War II. In the last 15 or 20 years, mystery novels set in specific historical periods or unique settings have become very popular. When you first started thinking about the Billy Boyle novels, did you know that you wanted to write a mystery novel, or did you originally think that you'd like to write a novel set during World War II and the mystery kind of element came later? What was that process like originally for you?
Well, for me, it was mostly wanting to do a thriller type. I'm a big fan of the early Jack Higgins stuff, and that's what I at first thought I was going to try my hand at. And then I actually did some real research, and not exactly a business plan, but researched what was selling, what genres were selling, and I came across a comment that historical mysteries were the fastest growing genre of mysteries. And I thought, well, it wouldn't be hard to change this into a mystery from a thriller, and then that gets into the whole idea of a series. And that worked out well because I had written 2 manuscripts before I was signed by a literary agent, and one of the things they said was they liked the fact that there were already 2, and that it looked like this could develop as a series. So usually things happen mostly by accident, but it was maybe 50% accident and 50% planning in this case.
Right. Well, Billy Boyle, the protagonist, is the nephew in the books of General Eisenhower. Was that connection there from the beginning, or was that a way for you to have Billy Boyle move from campaign to campaign or battle to battle in the series?
That was the original thought, that as I was planning this out, I wanted to have a character that I had a lot of flexibility with in terms of moving him around the conflict. And the notion of him being sort of the ne'er-do-well nephew of General Eisenhower just really intrigued me, and that gives him the ability to go anywhere I want him to go, because I can have his uncle send him there. But it also gives him access to the high command, and he then can meet historical figures. And if you accept the notion that he's related to Eisenhower, then everything else falls into place.
Right, right. Well, obviously, you've done a lot of research about World War II for these novels. Are there particular battles or World War II incidents that you think don't get as much attention in people's minds these days as, say, the D-Day invasion or other iconic battles?
That's exactly what I'm finding, even in my own knowledge about the war. I thought I knew a lot. And one of the things that I didn't know was how much time elapsed from Eisenhower being sent over in 1942 to his assuming overall command to plan the invasion. He actually spent more time in the Mediterranean theater than he did in England. So that's why a lot of the books now have been set in Italy, or start with Billy in Italy or in North Africa and being sent back north, because he does have to follow Eisenhower. That is not a downside, but it's one obligation I have, is to follow Eisenhower's path. So I'm learning a lot, and I'm finding that the more I learn, the more interesting small facts there are to explore about the war. The book that will come out next year in September, A Mortal Terror, or September 2011, really got put together because I was just trolling around the internet and found a medical study that was commissioned right after World War II, when an Army psychiatrist wrote that it was about combat fatigue. And he said 98% of all soldiers kept in combat long enough will develop severe combat fatigue. The remaining 2% will be psychopaths. Not as a result of the combat, but they would have entered combat as a psychopath and never been affected by it if they lived. And I thought that was really interesting. And what would it be like for a psychopathic killer to be in the midst of a battle? And how would you tell the difference? And how could you track them down? So the next book is going to have as its kind of theme an investigation into combat fatigue and how the Army addressed it, but also, how do you find a killer on a battlefield? And that'll take place in Italy again, in the Anzio beachhead, which was a landing south of Rome that didn't quite work out the way they had hoped.
Right. That's kind of interesting that you mentioned that, because certainly just, from a layman's perspective without any specialized knowledge, I would just say that my gut feeling is that just the treatment, and not even necessarily the treatment, but just the discussion of what's now referred to as post-traumatic stress disorder among current troops who are fighting in Afghanistan or Iraq. I mean, you routinely see that on the front pages, and it's much more open versus this whole kind of generational thing of when the veterans came back from World War II, and it was called combat fatigue. And at that point, it certainly wasn't written about on the front page of newspapers.
No. And the Army forgot all the lessons that it had learned in the First World War, because as that conflict advanced, and they called it shell shock then, they actually developed a means of dealing with it, and then promptly forgot all that. And in the British theater, there were every Army division had all sorts of medical personnel, including a dietitian on staff, but they did not have a single psychiatrist for a whole division, which could be 10,000 to 15,000 men. So they were slow to adapt, and it became a matter of particular unit, the belief of particular generals as to how it should be viewed. Some did view it as just a consequence of battle. Others saw it as there's no such thing as combat fatigue. It's all due to poor leadership or poor morale. So it was a pretty tough time for the GIs that had, especially in Italy. They'd been fighting since North Africa and had gone through Sicily and then through the winter battles in the mountains in Italy, and it was pretty terrible.
Wow. So I'm assuming with the research that you have done, that you already have a list of battles or campaigns that would be perfect for future Billy Boyle novels.
Yeah, there's really no shortage of ideas. There's all sorts of interesting little tidbits. So there's plenty to go, and I slowed the pace of the timeline down because this book has done very, very well, Rag and Bone, and there's a lot of interest in the series, and I don't want to get to the end of the war too fast, so
right.
It'll be a while before we get to D-Day, and that's actually one battle that I don't know how to address with Billy. It's such a big event.
Exactly.
I'm struggling with that. How would I insert him into that, and what would the story be? And how could you tell that whole story from his perspective? So, but I've got months to go, so I'm not worried about that.
Or you could always do what Bernard Cornwell did with the Richard Sharp books. He's basically skipped around in time and has written from various
Right.
Napoleonic settings, and it's kind of interesting. But what is your writing background? You had mentioned earlier that you had written these 2 manuscripts, that you were interested in writing a thriller in the Jack Higgins kind of style. Have you always written and always wanted to write novels? Did you write short stories before you wrote novels?
No, first of all, I'm totally intimidated by short stories. I don't know how to tell it. I can't be economical. I have to range around in the narrative. So I'm really in awe of people who can write short stories. Now I'm one of these people who always wanted to write a book, and I actually didn't start until the day after my 50th birthday because I had realized that it had been 30 years since I first had the notion of wanting to write a book. And if I waited another 30 years, I'd be too old to do it. So the day after, I started writing. And it was really to challenge myself and see if I could plot out a book, create characters, and finish the task. And actually, my first book was a thriller, and Billy Boyle was a secondary character in it, and that never went anywhere. So that's on the shelf or in the drawer. But after that helped me create that notion of Billy as a military detective. Those were the first 2 manuscripts that got picked up.
That's great. What's the writing process like for you now that you have written? Rag and Bone is the 5th book in the series, correct?
The 5th, yes.
The 5th. Do you outline a book before you start writing the first word? Do you write more organically? What's your process like?
I don't know how to outline. I actually tried in Rag and Bone to outline because I guess I had always bought into the notion that was the right way to do it, and I just failed at it. So I did outline it, and I had one of those big poster sticky pads, and I filled up 2 of them with an outline and pasted them on my wall, and then sat down and wrote the book and totally ignored them. So I guess I'm just not going to outline. And what I do is come up with a theme. So there's a big issue I wanted to deal with, whether it's the Caton Forest massacre and the price of loyalty, or dealing with combat fatigue, and then build the fictional mystery around that. And I think really it's all a matter of how your brain works. Some people organize their thoughts ahead of time. Others, like me, have to organize them in the process of writing, and we all get to the same place. And there's no right or wrong way to do that.
Right. With the success that you've achieved with your Billy Boyle novels, do you have any advice that you would offer someone who is listening who may be an aspiring writer or interested in trying to write and publish their own novels?
Well, I was just at a conference where Dennis Lehane spoke, and he teaches writing, and he said, one of the things he ends up telling his students is just tell the damn story, that beginning writers add so much background that they never actually tell the story. And he actually didn't say damn, he said something else, but I don't say that. And he gave the comparison of, everybody knows how to tell a joke. 2 guys go into a bar, this happens, that happens. And that the equivalent of a new writer is 2 guys walked into a bar. One of them was an accountant. His name was John Smith, and he had gone to Princeton. So, on and on and on, you never get to the punchline. So
right.
That's one thing, just tell the damn story. And there's some excellent books that I recommend. Francine Prose, who's, writes prose, is a novelist, had terrific book out a few years ago, and I'm struggling to remember the title. The Art of Reading. No, Reading Like a Writer. And it's a very thin book, but she has a chapter on the first sentence, a chapter on dialogue, just fabulous stuff. And I really encourage people to read her book to get a sense of the structure of writing. I think it's fabulous. So I think reading deeply and reading to understand the structure of a novel is very important if you want to write. And unfortunately, it sometimes has the unintended outcome of ruining enjoyable reading because you're always picking it apart.
Right.
You have to. Same thing with watching a detective show on TV. It's like, oh yeah, that's who it is, and that's why they're doing this.
Right. Are there other mystery writers or even historical mystery writers that you've been reading and that you would recommend, that you enjoy?
Well, actually, another outcome of doing this is my reading tends to be mainly nonfiction because
right.
I'm reading for background. So I don't really read enough to answer that question of reading fiction. Because I heard Dennis Lehane, I just went out and got one of his books. I'd never seen his movies, but I'd never read his books. So unfortunately, my reading is mostly nonfiction. Right now, I'm reading everything I can about the Vatican and World War II.
Right.
That's what I'm working on. So pretty uninformed for a mystery writer.
That's okay. So if someone is interested in learning more about the Billy Boyle novels and about you, where can they find you online?
On my website, jamesrbenn.com, or just search by the name Benn or Billy Boyle. And there's great reviews posted on the Amazon site and on Soho Press, my wonderful publisher as well.
Great. And that's Benn, Benn, if someone's listening. So, again, we've been speaking with James Benn, author of the historical mystery Rag and Bone, the latest in his Billy Boyle World War II historical mystery novels. James, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
This is Lee Child, and I'm listening to the Reading and Writing Podcast.
Thanks for listening to my latest podcast. If you have a chance, please leave a review of the podcast in iTunes. It only takes a moment. Until next time, read some good books and be well.
If you're looking for a credit card that fits your lifestyle, look no further. U.S. Bank has credit cards that make every day rewarding, no matter what you're into. Feeling hungry? Check out the U.S. Bank Altitude Go Visa Signature Card. Earn 4 times points on takeout, food delivery, and dining. And get 2 times points at gas stations, grocery stores, and on streaming. That'll keep your wallet and your mouth full. Big spender? The U.S. Bank Visa Platinum Card has a low intro APR for large purchases or balance transfers. And you call the shots with the U.S. Bank Cash Plus Visa Signature Card. Choose 2 categories each quarter. Earn 5% back on your first $2,000 of eligible purchases for those categories. So don't just get a credit card. Get the right card to make every day more rewarding. Cashback, merchandise, travel rewards, and low intro APRs are all waiting. Learn more at usbank.com/credit card. The creditor and issuer of these cards is U.S. Bank National Association, pursuant to a license of Visa USA Inc., and the cards are available to the United States residents only. Some restrictions may apply. Member FDIC.